Tampa General Hospital and USF Health Morsani College of Medicine are bringing the power of academic medicine to Palm Beach County and the Treasure Coast. For nearly 2 decades, Tampa General has been ranked as one of the nation's best hospitals. And for over 50 years, Tampa General has been Florida's leading academic health system. Learn more about their growing network of physicians at tgh.org/the Palm Beaches. All right, so welcome to the Palm Beach North podcast, where we dive into the stories of leaders, innovators, and change makers really making a difference right here in our community. I'm your host, Noel Martinez, and I am so delighted to have my friend here, Bill Perry, CEO and Managing Shareholder of Gunster. In case you haven't heard, Gunster is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. This firm has deep, deep roots in the Florida business community. A little bit about Bill's background. He joined Gunster back in 1986 as a young lawyer. Now he's rose to lead the firm as CEO and managing shareholder. He has absolutely helped shape the firm's growth. Beyond his legal career, he's a pretty cool guy, does some really cool stuff, right? He's an avid runner, fisherman, golfer, and the guy is a private pilot, which we're gonna ask him about later. He's also very passionate about the community, is involved with many organizations, including the Economic Council of Palm Beach County. Bill, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Noel, good to spend time with you as always, and great to be on the podcast.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your background and early life. So you were born in Jenkintown, Pennsylvania, but you finished high school right down the street here at Palm Beach Gardens High School. So tell me about that. What brought your family here to South Florida?
So a little bit of a journey to get here. My parents met in Philadelphia, and Jenkintown's a suburb, close-in suburb to Philly, and that's where I was born. But pretty shortly thereafter, we moved to Connecticut, and I grew up in Connecticut, first in Fairfield, Southern Connecticut, and later most of my schooling was in Manchester, Connecticut. And then there was a great New England ice storm in it was either 77 or 78, where New England froze for about 2 weeks. And my mother at the time had MS and was losing her mobility and could not get around the winter, couldn't drive, couldn't walk on the sidewalks. So we came to Florida in 1978 to get away from the cold and also to get her closer to her parents, who had lived in Lake Worth since about 1965. And as a young kid, I'll remember I would come to Florida to see my grandparents in the winter when it was cold up there. We'd, I think it was Eastern Airlines, we'd fly from Hartford to Palm Beach, and you'd still at that point get out of the airplane on the tarmac and you'd get that blast of heat. And you knew you were in Florida.
Yeah, I bet. So I read somewhere that your father was a lawyer. Did that influence your decision to pursue a legal career?
A little bit. I kind of backed into my legal career. My father was a lawyer. He went to Georgetown prior to the Second World War, and then fought in the Second World War. He was with Omar Bradley's headquarters in very close to the Battle of the Bulge in Europe. After the war on the GI Bill was when he went to law school. He went to Brooklyn Law School, graduated, and throughout his career, he generally was in-house. He was an in-house lawyer later with insurance companies in Hartford, which was one of the reasons we moved to Hartford. My mother was a writer, English major, and also worked with various insurance companies, including the Aetna company. And she was more in their communications, website, marketing materials, and was did a lot of writing in that regard.
I also read somewhere that you originally planned to go to medical school. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. When I got out of high school, I went to University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, back to where I was born. And I was pretty firmly committed at that point at 18 to be a doctor. So I was a chemistry major for my first couple years. First 2 years at Penn, I was taking all the pre-med prerequisites, which is not an easy curriculum, and particularly not easy at a tough and Ivy League school like Penn. But I enjoyed what I was studying there, and I might have, had I stayed at Penn all 3 years, I probably would have stayed on the med school track. But in my sophomore year at Penn, I had a English professor, a guy, Dr. Robert Turner. He was one of the leading Shakespeare historians, and he was the head of the English department, I believe, at that time at Penn. And he talked me into applying for a program that University of Pennsylvania has, where they send 7 students to King's College, which is part of the University of London system. And King's will send 7 students to University of Pennsylvania. And I think the program's still going on today. So I applied for the program and I ended up getting it. And the only catch was I switched from a chemistry major to an English literature major. And then while I was in London, London and that experience was one of the best in my educational career. And I'm so glad I did it. But while I was in London, I realized I could graduate in 3 years, but not if I wanted to go to med school. I had to go back to Penn and take all the prerequisites that I hadn't fulfilled because I switched to English literature. And I took the LSAT while I was in London and scored high enough where it was pretty clear I could get into law school and some good ones. So I applied to mostly, at that point, I wanted to come back to Florida. So I applied to all the Florida schools and got into University of Florida and, started my journey down the law path instead of the medical path. So I always credit Dr. Turner with kind of, changing the direction of my life with his recommendation to go to London.
All right, so let's fast forward a little bit. So you spent some time in University of Florida. That's where you went to law school. 1986 comes around.
Yeah.
Right? Now you are interviewing with Gunster. What was that impression like? What was that experience like?
It was a good experience. The interview process. So, at the time there were a lot of great firms in Florida, and old firms like, their vintage going back to the 1920s. And I interviewed with a lot of the larger firms in South Florida, both in Miami and West Palm Beach. I had a strong preference to be in West Palm Beach. It's what I knew. And I really like where we live in the north end of this county. I think it's one of the nicest places to live in South Florida. I think you probably agree.
I'm a little biased, but yes.
But so it's strong bias to be here. And at that time, and probably for the last 60 or 70 years, Gunster has been the big firm in town in West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County. And it was a commercial law firm, and I was most interested in doing either corporate or real estate. I landed on real estate, but I was interested in doing transactions and development. And the development of Palm Beach County actually trailed both Miami-Dade and Broward County. It was particularly the north half wasn't developed till 2000s, 1990s and 2000s, once the MacArthur Foundation land was released and began to be developed. So that hit right in the prime of my legal career, and so I got to do what I hoped and help shape some of the development that's occurred in my backyard.
Yeah, we'll get into some of that as well. So obviously, you know a lot of history. I knew that you're a big history buff, and I'm not sure if our listeners know that, but you're an English literature major. So how have those skills really translated into your legal work?
History and English?
Yeah.
So they always say for law school, the best major is a writing major. Journalism is generally considered the best because you write the most concisely, but English literature is way up there. I do think understanding history helps in anything you do in life. And then I wouldn't discount my chemistry minor because having good math and science skills, the analytical skills, I think is also very helpful. And that combination, I think, an analytical person who can be articulate and write well, I think that's generally a good sign for a lawyer if you can do those 3 things.
All right, let's go back to Gunster a little bit. So tell me, what was your first significant project or that you were working on at Gunster that really made you feel like, yeah, this is it. This is exactly what I was meant to do?
So I was just explaining to a young associate, I've got 2 probably. So the first 4 months into my legal practice was December of 1986. And December of 1986 was the last time they rewrote the tax code, Tax Reform Act, still the tax code we use today. And they made a lot of changes that caused people to want to sell real estate and get capital gains that year and not continue to hold real estate because some deductions that they'd historically been able to take were now no longer allowed. And that resulted in probably the busiest Christmas I've ever had as a lawyer, where we were doing deal after deal after deal after deal, and relatively early in my career. And I would say it was kind of a harrowing and scary prospect at the time, but I think I probably learned more in those last 2 months of the year than I maybe have the rest of my career about how to close transactions and what goes into getting deals done. So I would say that also I was lucky early in my career. I've been lucky to do some work with the Breakers, and they had a community called Breakers West that I kind of cut my teeth on. And it's still a lovely community today, one of my favorite golf course communities.
Great course,
that's out there, great course, and beautiful community. So I got to see that go from the very beginning of its development to the end, to when it was turned over, and still survives today as a nice testament to some of my early legal work.
All right. Well, you know what, Bill, this has been great so far. I really want to get into Gunster's growth and culture. But before we do that, why don't we take like 60 seconds for the Tampa General Hospital's Medical Minute? We'll be right back. All right, so I'm here with Dr. Heckman, a breast cancer specialist from the Tampa General Hospital Cancer Institute. Everyone's talking about AI. How is Tampa General using it?
They're using AI to help with clinical decision-making with the patient, diagnosing the patient, and also with treating the patient and seeing what the response to that treatment is. It also helps with risk evaluation, tumor evaluation, also with treatment protocols, clinical research, evaluating the patient's response to the research, and also research itself with helping actual research help permutate massive calculations.
So let's talk about cancer. How's AI being used to treat breast cancer?
It's being used to treat breast cancer by choosing correct treatment with a doctor's help also, and also with choosing and diagnosing it actually, and also helping with the research to further along our improvement in cancer care.
It's not going to replace doctors, right? It's just a resource for doctors, correct?
No, it's not going to replace doctors, but it improves patients' experience with doctors because they're not focusing on the computer, they're focusing on the patient. So the personalization and the care becomes just a lot more beneficial to the patient.
Awesome, Doc. Thank you very much. And that was your Medical Minute, brought to you by Tampa General Hospital. All right, so Gunster's celebrating its 100th anniversary this year, which is incredible. Like 100 years is a really, really long time. What do you think has been the key factors behind the firm's longevity?
Well, a couple things. It's always great to be in the right place at the right time. And when the firm started in 1925, it was on the Harvey building, which was a brand new skyscraper in West Palm Beach in 1925, 1926. Both the Harvey and Como building date to exactly the same years that Gunster was just starting. And so that was the beginning to me of, the West Palm Beach kind of transformation from a frontier town with a railroad stop to a real city with, 10-story plus buildings and a good degree of commerce during that first Florida land boom in the 1920s. And that's when we started. So we're off to a good start. Didn't continue that way. There were some massive hurricanes that came in 26 and 28, and then a depression. And Gunster and West Palm really didn't experience their next renaissance till post-World War II, where a lot of GIs that had come down here to train on the bases that were out throughout Florida liked what they saw and came back after the war to settle here and call it home. And that's really when you see Florida, you see the city of West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County, and you see Gunster really take off. They kind of ride that wave and grow from what was at the beginning a very small law firm, a couple guys, to a very, a commercial firm of decent size, 20 lawyers, 30 lawyers, and grew from there. So it was really the growth and development in Florida as a whole and Palm Beach County in particular that really spurred the growth of the law firm. So right place, right time in life is a great thing. In about 2008, we made a decision to grow from being a South Florida firm, very well known throughout Florida, about 100 lawyers, into a statewide firm. And we did so because we saw an opportunity that there wasn't, like when I started law school, maybe one firm that was considered, the best in Florida. and we said, we can be that firm. We can grow and become that firm. We can go to markets we haven't been in, like Tampa and Jacksonville and Tallahassee at that time, and open an office that hopefully attracts some very good people and very good lawyers to join us and build that firm. And since 2008 till now, that's kind of the mission we've been on. And we think it's a worthy mission in the third largest state in the country to try to be that firm.
Of course, yeah. And with all that growth comes some challenges, right? Including, maintaining that culture and the true values that really started the firm. So how do you do that with all that growth?
Recruit the right people, right? Culturally, a lot of firms have a great culture. It's much harder to do when you have multiple offices, like we have currently 12 offices throughout Florida. When you have 12 offices, maintaining that culture off different communities and different offices is much harder. It's something you got to work at. But if you recruit the right people, they come in with basically the same set of fundamental values that you have. And if that's one of the things you sort for when you're recruiting, you sort for people that are aligned in their value system. It's not as hard as it is if you do it a different way and just grow for growth's sake.
Tell me a little bit about that. So tell me about that recruitment process. Where do you find these young attorneys and when do you know that that's the right fit?
Well, it's not always a young attorney. You might bring in some, we've merged with a few smaller firms and we look for the same thing. If we recruit a lawyer right out of law school, we look for some of the success factors that we've seen in lawyers that have joined us over the decades. Are they hardworking? Do they have anything in their background that shows they know how to play in a team environment instead of flying solo? Somebody who played team sports at a high level in college, somebody who was in the military. They're used to playing in that kind of environment. And there are other examples of that. Culturally, what are they interested in? Do they want to give back to the community? Do they have demonstrated philanthropy or civic engagement? Because that's very important to us. So you find people that are aligned with you and your value system, I think it's a lot easier to make those people successful in your firm and to maintain the culture that you think is important.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, the firm has strong tradition of serving some of Florida's wealthiest individuals. How has that shaped your practice in your practice areas, and how does that affect your growth strategy?
So it's very unique to us. There are only a few large firms in the entire country that really focus on the private wealth space, but we're one of them. And we have one of the largest private wealth practices, not just in Florida, but nationally amongst big firms. Again, you're a byproduct of your environment. On the town of Palm Beach in the 1890s, Henry Flagler built a hotel that attracted the billionaires of the era, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers, the JP Morgans. They all came here and they vacationed here and they spent time literally in our backyard. And that's tradition is continued today with what you're seeing with the number of people that have moved here during the post-COVID era that have come to Florida, the number of businesses that have relocated here, particularly into West Palm Beach as part of the Wall Street South initiative. You're seeing that migration of wealth. And there have been a lot of studies done. They show while other states may outgrow us numerically, like Texas grows more on a gross number basis than Florida does. But from a wealth migration standpoint, Florida's the number one country in the state from wealth migration here. And given our environment, you try to imagine why that wouldn't continue into the foreseeable future.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. So the legal landscape has changed a ton, especially in recent years. It's really, really changed a lot. How has Gunster adapted to the changing landscape?
Well, technology is a big part of that. There's a couple of things I would, with our office space, we've tried to embrace and adopt the remote working and the fact that this next generation of lawyers may not work the same way my generation worked, and adopt to those new norms. We really saw an acceleration of that during the COVID era with the adoption, pretty quick adoption of Zoom calls and Teams calls for, as a way of doing business, which changes your need for, to be in the office every day, and also changes your need to have office space and conference rooms to some degree. So we're trying to design our offices, the physical plan, around what we think how people are going to gather in the future to practice together. Doesn't make any sense to be in a big firm and still work out of your kitchen table all the time, because you're in a big firm because you can collaborate with others and get the collective wisdom instead of just your best thinking on something. That's the benefit of a big firm. So you have to find ways to get people to come into the office, want to gather, want to collaborate to make it successful. We're putting a lot of energy into that. At the same time, technology is going to be a big part of the future, and you can see it. It's already here, and it's coming at a greater and faster pace than ever before. So I think the law firms that get ahead of that curve and figure out how to embrace technology as part of their practice are going to be the winners down the road in the technology game.
So you guys are celebrating your 100th anniversary this year. What are your goals for the next 100 years? What do you want Gunster to look like 100 years from now?
So for the past 100 years, our couple of our hallmarks are our culture and collaborative nature from an internal perspective, but also our lawyers are out in the community trying to do good in a variety of ways. Some are on your chamber board, some are on the Economic Council or the BDB, some are in more philanthropic organizations. We try not to dictate to people what they get involved with, but we tell them to get involved in something and to follow their passion. Like if your passion is dogs, you should be in a dog rescue charity. If your passion, is Little League, you should go coach Little League and kids. And we try to get our lawyers out in the community. We think it's good. Well, it's good for the community, we think, for people to engage that way. But it's also good for the lawyers, and they get more well-known. And people see them, particularly if they're doing something they're passionate about, they see them and get to know them as a person. And that has a long-term benefit to the individual lawyer in addition to the community.
Let's talk about community. You just said it, community. You mentioned organizations like the Economic Council, the BDB. I know you're heavily engaged with the Economic Council of Palm Beach County. You're involved with the Florida Chamber. You're involved with so many statewide organizations. What motivates your community service?
I like being involved, and I like being involved in a way that you can help make change, positive change. Whether that's through a strategic planning process or very tangible efforts that result in a positive benefit to the community. Couple examples: the Florida Chamber Foundation, which you mentioned, which I was on with Mark Wilson, who I think is a fantastic and visionary leader of the state. Helped them with a strategic planning process for the foundation, where they reorganized a little bit how they approach the various issues they try to tackle, which are significant issues: our educational system, our infrastructure, transportation and mobility, things that are very important in a state our size. And I think they've made leaps and bounds differences in how they approach it and their effectiveness at executing, implementing change, positive change throughout the state. At a local level, I think the Economic Council is that entity, that they're a policy-based organization looking for ways to solve problems in our county. Affordable housing is a problem. It's a major issue that the Economic Council will take on. Having a top-flight public education system in our county, I wouldn't say it's a problem. I think that our school is doing quite well. We're an A-rated system, but can we be better? Can we be the best? What do we need to do to get there? I think those are the kind of policy issues that kind of motivate me. And then the final one, back in 2016, the Economic Council took on the sales tax, the infrastructure sales tax. Not common for a business organization to support a tax. Certainly was controversial at the time, whether to do it or not. But roll the clock forward a decade, $2.7 billion have been raised. Half of that has gone into our schools. Half of that's gone into our communities, particularly in the gardens, which I drive by all the time. They have a bunch of signs that show which community parks benefited from that tax source. So that kind of change is rewarding to see when you discuss it at a policy level, but then you try to get out there and get your shovel and try to help implement it and get it passed and see the results down the road.
So I want to get back into you a little bit. You're a really busy guy. You're traveling all over the place. You've got a lot going on. I know I've seen you at meetings early in the morning and late at night. How do you balance your professional responsibilities with your civic engagement and with all that make time for your family?
So it's hard. I mean, it's hard being a professional because you have a lot of expectations on you. You try to create balance in your life, whether that's involving your significant other and your kids into what you're doing or getting involved with what they're doing. So from my kids' perspective, I coached for a bunch of years and spent a lot of time with them on the baseball fields and basketball courts of the North End. Got to meet a lot of people that way, and coach a lot of people's kids, which was a lot of fun for me, but also got to spend a lot of time with them. Same thing with the civic organizations and philanthropic organizations. Generally, my wife and I will get involved in things together and try to support the causes we both believe in and, give both our time and our dollars to those things. So we like to do those things together and spend time. But it is very hard to strike that balance as a professional. It's no different for a lawyer or a doctor. You've chosen a busy existence, and you got to find a way to create some time for both yourself, for a little downtime and me time, and for your family.
All right, let's talk about time for yourself, right? So I mentioned earlier that you are an avid runner. You mentioned you're really into golf. That's really been your big love lately. You're a big fisherman. You fly planes. Mm-hmm. You're a pilot. You've got some really cool hobbies. Which one do you enjoy the most?
Well, it's varied at different points in my life. I still love, I was a runner competitively when I was young, ran through my 40s. Right now I'm curtailing my running. I'm pretty careful about it. I don't want to get hurt, but I still love to run. I run a few times a week, and it's one of my most enjoyable things to do. Fishing, I've kind of spent a ton of time in the Bahamas and love fishing and spearfishing in the Bahamas. I would say golf more recently has replaced that time. We're spending a lot more time on golf courses than fishing boats today. And then flying is my passion. I've used it extensively with work to get to Tallahassee, which is not easy to get to.
Not fun getting to Tallahassee.
Get to Jacksonville, which is a little easier, but still a long way to drive. Enjoy flying for work, but we also fly for pleasure, and we've been using the airplane to take trips, pretty much anywhere in the Southeast, and it's a neat way to travel. And I find when I'm flying, I'm using a different part of the brain than I use to be a lawyer. So it's actually relaxing because you have to be, when you're flying, all in the moment and concentrating on the various data inputs that you're getting from the airplane, from ATC, from your engines, from, everything you're doing. You really need to be aware of your surroundings and what's going on. But in a weird way, that's pretty relaxing for me because I'm not focused on the next deadline I got to meet or a contract that has to go out the door while I'm doing that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, we all have mentors. We've all had people that have really made an impact on our lives. Who's the most significant mentor in your career?
So I've had a couple. I started working with a lawyer, still one of the best technical lawyers I think I know, a guy named Jerry Aaron. And he was my early mentor who really kind of taught me how to be a lawyer, how to craft a contract, how to do a deal. And I would credit him with a lot of my technical side skill. Then I had another mentor at our firm, a guy named Paul Cornell, who was very good at client development. He was just one of those guys that, everybody wanted to talk to. And Paul was just instrumental in helping me at the right stage of my career to figure out how to generate business on my own, how to interface with a new client and deal with that aspect of the practice of law. And he was very helpful to me in my career. So those two in different ways. I always tell young lawyers, I think it's good to work with a lot of different people because, you're a little bit like a chameleon. You're not exactly like anybody else, and somebody's going to do something a certain way because that works for them, but that may not work for you, or it might. And if it does, then maybe you adopt it and make it part of your own style. And I was lucky to be surrounded by a lot of great lawyers, and I would say I took a piece from each of them to craft my own style of how to practice law.
So, you've had a big part in really shaping what our community looks like. You've gotten tons of recognition over the years, everything from, all kinds of Florida Trend Awards. You were Florida Trend's Legal Elite. You were recognized as one of them. So you've had a very, very impressive career. What are you most proud of?
The firm, where the firm going, we did a strategic plan in 2007 and 8 with a vision, with a hope and a vision to become one of the largest law firms in Florida and the best commercial law firm in Florida. And for the last 16 years, we've been kind of working that plan. And a lot of strategic plans that any business does, but including law firms, you draft them, you have the vision, but it sits on a shelf and you don't execute on that vision. I think I've been lucky and it's not just me, it's the people I got around me, our CEO, our COO, our head of marketing and strategy, our chairman, our board, a lot of our shareholders. Everybody put their shoulder into it and took the plan and turned it into a reality. And I think that from taking a 100-year-old law firm that was pretty much a West Palm Beach firm and turning it into a statewide firm, I think that's probably the one I'll look back on and say, you know what, I'm happy I was able to spend my time at the wheel helping with that cause.
Well, this has been awesome. I've got a couple more questions I want to get in here before we close up. You touched on this a few different times. What kind of advice would you give a young and upcoming attorney?
Young and
brand new attorneys coming out of school. He's got an opportunity to get some advice from Bill Perry, who's built one of the largest law firms in the country.
So I think with a brand new attorney, I'd give him one advice. The first advice I give him is learn your craft, because until you're a good lawyer, you really don't have anything to talk about or sell out in the community. You've got to be, particularly at the level we do it, you have to be a very good craftsman. And your first few years out of law school is like you're the carpenter's apprentice. You're learning how to do your craft. And if you have a good mentor, you will become a good lawyer, but that takes time. Some of the youngest generation, they want to get to the next step, which is then you want to figure out, okay, what's your place in the community? And that person, let's say 3 to 5 years out, I would say you need to get out in the community and chase your passion. And if you chase your passion, you're going to be enjoying what you're doing with your non-legal time. You'll feel like you're achieving something. It'll be rewarding to you personally. And if it is, then people are going to see that. They're going to see your passion. They're going to see how you interact on an issue where you're not there just to make money. You're there to do good. And that's going to rebound positively for you down the road. But before you do that, I think your first few years out of law school, you're learning to be a carpenter. You're figuring out how to hit the nails in the right order. So I would say first thing, learn your craft. Second, get out in the community and find your passion.
Love it. All right, last question. I ask this to everyone. Every guest that I have that comes on the show, you've done a lot in your life, like we mentioned earlier. What do you want your legacy to be? You didn't know that question was coming, so I just threw it at you.
I think your legacy for most of it is through your kids, right? You're looking at your kids and watching them succeed, and then in my case, grandkids as well now, watching them succeed. And I think that's everybody's legacy at the end of the day. Stuff I do at work, I'm proud of, but I'm really, really proud of my kids, their family, my grandkids, and I think that's going to be my legacy.
That's awesome, Bill. This has been great. I can't thank you enough for everything you do for our community. This was awesome. I learned a lot about you. Hopefully our viewers got to learn a lot about you as well. Anything we've missed? Where can people get more information on Gunster?
So Gunster.com, our brand new website we just rolled out for our 100th centennial. And there's a ton of information about the firm, its history. Later this year, we're going to publish a centennial book. We've recorded the history of Gunster for the last 100 years in a cocktail table book with a lot of interesting and historical pictures. We're going to send you a copy.
Can't wait.
And so those two things, I think, will tell you a lot about our firm.
Well, thank you so much again for being here. Thank you for your leadership. We can't thank you enough for being so supportive, not only of our community, of our chamber. You guys do so much for us, so we really appreciate everything that you do. For everyone tuning in, thank you so much. This has been great. Don't forget to share, like, follow, tell all your friends about all the amazing things going on in Palm Beach North. We'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.